Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How seriously should we take angels? What is a miracle? Why have UFOs changed so much since 1947?
Hello, and welcome to the 827th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and those varied questions came from my co-host, partner in paranormal adventures, and dad, Paul. And today, we bring you one of our famous open line shows with our famous guest co-host here, who we will reveal, if you do not already know who he is, in just a little bit. And we welcome your calls today as well. The number is 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. So Shane Sirois, you are our famous guest co-host. Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
And I'm glad to be here and survive the snow over there, the whopping 4 inches they called for.
Well, this has been a pretty rough winter on New Hampshire in general.
It's been, well, where I live, we got really slammed, but they were calling for more, so we lucked out with, 4 inches. Fluffy, so it was nice.
Oh, it was nothing for you. Not nothing for here either. So I have a riot of informality today without my bow tie. You can always tell because I have to shovel the snow. Your mother makes me shovel snow before I come into the studio.
I don't know who you are anymore.
Okay, well, we'll fix that next week. Anyway, let's dive right in here. We have lots of interesting questions. The first one here we'll take is Doug from Texas.
So Doug writes to us. Whoopie-doo. So he writes to us, question for your next open line show. Has anyone ever reported seeing the ghost, quote-unquote, of a caveman? I'm not talking about Bigfoot. I'm talking about an apparition of a Neanderthal-type hominid. And the oldest ghosts I've ever heard of were Roman soldiers.
Well, I think I probably can answer a yes to that. In 1989, and this is in Footsteps in the Attic, my 2002 book. I was in England chasing the interestingly named Beast of Exmoor. Exmoor being a national park in the southwestern part of the country, in the county of Devon, and where there are two major national parks, Dartmoor National Park, where Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle was set, a Sherlock Holmes story. It's rather interesting. And then, of course, Exmoor is in the northern part of the county. So I was down in the southern part on Dartmoor, which is very much to my taste. I have a lot of our ancestors came from there, and it was, I felt like it was kind of like coming home. But there was a place called Wistman's Wood. It's only a couple of acres, and it's a very odd woodland with stunted oak trees that are only about 12 or tops 15 feet high. And there's a sign, don't go in here, because naturally I went in. And there's a huge quartz vein, which you New Age types will recognize as something interesting as far as energies are concerned, running right through the middle of the wood. And it was a lovely experience, very powerful. And that supposedly was a place where the Druids, whom the Romans didn't like, because they practiced human sacrifice, although my understanding is that human sacrifice was practiced on people who committed capital crimes, but they would do it rather formally when the executions would occur. But the Romans didn't like even that, so they didn't like the Druids and chased them all over the place. And supposedly the last Druids in England hid in this Wistman's Wood. And the term Wistman is from, nobody's really sure what the name is from, but it's having to do with wished hounds, which is sort of an Old English or Middle English term for spooky hounds that are seen with the Great Hunt and this sort of thing. There were all these things from European folklore. So it even has a sort of a magical name. So I went in there, and I happened to look to my left, a little bit uphill, and there was a figure, or actually I should say half a figure, the top half of a figure in fur clothing and a fur cap. Very ancient looking, but I couldn't see anything from the waist down. It turned and looked, how far, maybe 50 feet, it wasn't far at all. Turned and looked through me. That's the best way I can see. It reminds me of the case in Maine where the figure's coming down the stairs and can't quite see the people.
Oh yeah.
And this turned out to be someone who was still alive and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and it lasted for a few seconds. I did not have a camera with me like an idiot. And I guess I was supposed to be, the camera was in the car. And anyway, that was unfortunate, but I did see this, and it lasted a while, at least 25 to 30 seconds, which is rather long. And then it just turned, and I who or what could this be? It wasn't Neanderthal, but it very well may have been a time slip sort of thing with the Druids involved. The weather being cold there lots of the year, that would have been in furs. I mean, so I just that might be something like that. As far as what I've heard, I have heard of ghosts of Neanderthals, things like this, in France. But again, I didn't witness it myself. Shane, Ben, what say you?
I have not, but it's a great question, and I don't doubt that people experience it, obviously. But I think I've encountered things in the wilderness and out and about that I don't know what it is for sure, but there's been strange behaviors, unlike like a modern human being, those different weird characteristics and vocalizations that I don't know what they are, and people can attribute them to Bigfoots or other creatures, but I don't know for sure. And I've seen trees and branches being bent and moved with no body there, nothing that I could see with my own eyes, anyways. So, but who knows? Maybe I have encountered one. I just don't know it. Well,
as we're always saying, we put labels on things that we can understand, and the prehistoric man, if you want to say, Neanderthal or other Cro-Magnon or otherwise, maybe it's very common, but people just don't identify it as that. They might not see anything, Right. And if our theories are correct, we're dealing more with time instead of with death. And time slips, and people sometimes say, well, how do you, people, if your theory is right, that it's really the juxtaposition of different times or intersect points, things of this kind of parallel worlds where it would be to us ancient times or even yesterday, how come we don't see people from the future? Well, who says we don't see people from the future? I have a number of examples of that, I believe, and the whole UFO thing, especially the nuts and bolts ones. There have been a number of theories that these are people from the future. So, I mean, if you can see people from the future, or even people who are dead here, not elsewhere or elsewhen, then you can certainly see ancient man. So, and the Roman thing, that happens a lot in England too. Whole armies marching by, which to me is more about time than it is about ghosts, especially if they're wearing clothes and all this stuff. It seems obvious to me.
Yes.
So that's a very good question, Doug. Thank you very much. But I think I may have seen something like that in England in 1989. Okay. All right, let's take one from Facebook. Okay. I'm sorry, I gave you a copy here, Shane. And this is from Charlie, the first one, in Willow Creek, Oregon.
Okie dokie. Charlie, Charlie, send us a phonetic spelling. Writes to us. I am curious to know if, in all your studies and experiences with the mysterious and the odd and unknowable, have you ever encountered an angel? I guess that's the first portion of the question. Would you like me to continue?
Okay, well, maybe one at a time is good.
Okay.
All right. So have we personally ever... Okay. Shane, I don't know about you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I've encountered on many occasions, actually, numerous occasions, what a lot of people would just, call an angel. But I've had several near-death experiences, and also instances where I was almost badly injured, but then also other times where I was, whether I was ill, I had some allergic reactions to at one point, where I encountered apparitions of people that didn't look normal. Like it looked like, I described this before, like something or somebody trying way too hard to look like a human, but it just seemed out of place. Even their like, I'm not saying they were lit up like a light bulb, but it's like if, I know I've described this on the show before, it's like if you took a photo of somebody standing out in the daylight, cut them out of that photo and place them into a dim room. So they weren't like illuminated, but they were brighter than they were supposed to be. It was out of place to me. And but in these circumstances, they've saved me, and they've also guided me. And so I definitely have encountered what I think some people would call an angel. I don't know that for sure. How we work. We don't put labels on things until we're absolutely certain of what it was. But it was all these were positive experiences, and on several occasions saved my life.
Yeah. Well, of course, the question arises: what do you mean by angel?
Right.
And the ancient Greek or any Greek would be angelos, which means messenger, and archangel would just be chief messenger. Okay. And these are known throughout pretty much every culture, most religions, certainly Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And as a matter of fact, an interesting there's in the Quran there's a chapter called the Sirois Miriam, which is actually pretty much about what anybody else would call the Annunciation or the Virgin Mary. Okay, and those who read it who are not Muslim sometimes get upset about it if they're Christian, because when you and I don't speak Arabic, but I mean in the English translations it says that a very well-built man, handsome and well-built, presented himself to Mary and became the father of Jesus, and this was an angel. Okay, so here's a very physical, muscular angel. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, Jabril, which is the Arabic word for Gabriel. Okay, so it's pretty much the same story. As a matter of fact, the Quran says more about the Virgin Mary than the Bible does, which I always found interesting. But nevertheless, what are we talking about here? And this is where the question. Somebody else wrote about miracles, and a miracle, of which an angel is often the messenger, comes from some ancient Indo-European roots that means to smile. So presumably, an angel brings us messages that are supposed to make us happy. Although some of the messages aren't necessarily happy. There were TV commercials lately for Bible bedtime stories. Well, I don't know who you're going to read them to, because most of the stories in the Bible, we wouldn't sleep. Although I guess sort of the parables or something in the Gospels, I suppose. But be that as it may, this is the concept of angel that has pretty much come down just about everywhere today. I myself had an experience that I really can't describe as anything else, although I didn't see any figure. I was in the St. Elias Mountains in the Yukon in 1979. That's before I moved to Rhode Island, and there was an avalanche. I was buried under 8 feet of snow. My comrades were frantic trying to dig me out. All of a sudden, and it was a really strange experience. This has happened to me several times in danger situations. It's like my body was in a panic, but somehow my mind was not. I don't know why, but that's just how it was. All of a sudden, I felt warmth in my right hand, and I couldn't breathe. It was heavy, and something pulled me up out of that snowbank, and my head pops up, and all the guys are staring, and they dug me out, and I wasn't so much as scratched, And obviously that would be an angelic kind of life-saving sort of experience. So I guess I would chalk that up. But as far as what it was, whether it was another version of myself in a more aware world in the multiverse, can we be our own angels? Sure. But growing up in Catholic school, we were always taught as children we had guardian angels. And now, getting into the paranormal, you hear people talking about their spirit guides and guardians. I mean, really, what's the difference? Except that I think a lot of them can be fake. feed you false information or push buttons and be parasitical. So it's a really complicated question. But yeah, I think I've had at least one angel experience, probably two.
I'll tell one of my, there's been the ones where I've seen them and they've been there and talking. But one, I don't normally talk about them, but here's one I'll share since you shared that one. This one I mostly heard, but I felt the presence that was there, which was a familiar feeling to me. But somewhere around the age of 28, 29, when I was that age, I was in my 20s. I had allergic reactions, and we never figured out really what it was. I wasn't changing diet. I wasn't exposed to anything different, but I was having these horrific allergic reactions, and so one time my mother actually stopped in to visit. And she looked at me and she's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "Get me to the emergency room right now." So I get to the emergency room. I'm standing in front of the clerk who's looking down at her paper, and I said, "I need to be seen." And then she looked at me and her mouth dropped, and because I was covered in hives too, and I just looked horrible. And I passed out. And I woke up and I had doctors and nurses all over me, and they were calling in EMTs that had dropped off somebody else, and the whole room was freaking out. Like, my blood pressure was like through the roof. It was like something like, 240 over.
What?
Yeah, and then it would plummet, and then it would come back up again. And they said, "We don't know how you didn't stroke or have a heart attack or whatever." But so stay with us, Shane. Stay with us, and I'd go out, and then I'd come back and stay with us. And there's all these people. I go out, and then I kind of come to in between. I can hear everything that's going on, but I can't really respond too well. And I hear a voice, a real calm voice in my ear, my right ear, said, "Tell them to give you." It was like, I'm pretty sure it was like 750 milligrams, or it was 750 measurements of prednisone. And they told me how many cc's or whatever of adrenaline that I needed, and one other thing that I can't remember because I just blurted out the other two, but there was something else. And so I got up enough energy to spit those words out, and then they're like, what? Shane, stay with us. And I blurted it out again, and I pass out. I wake up, and within a half hour, I felt like I could run a marathon. I felt amazing, and I said, "What happened? Why? Because it was bad. They really thought I wasn't going to make it." And I said, "What happened?" They said, "We did what you told us to do." And so the next one I had, which was the last one I ever had, I just walked in and said, "I need this, this, and that, or I'm going to die."
Yeah.
and I said, "Seriously, look in the file." And so they had to dig for the file.
Well, very glad you didn't die.
They found it, and but since then I haven't had it happen to me. So.
Well, that's thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, Ben, you had an interesting. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you were driving what we called it the Bumblebee. It was a little yellow car with a
the death
top.
trap. Yes. Yeah. Well, before I jump into that, there is actually more to Charlie's question.
Oh,
here.
right. Okay.
It's mostly she's sharing her experiences with us, and that's important.
Yeah.
So let's hop into that real quick. And Charlie continues by saying, "I have not, that I'm aware of, had an experience with angels, but my mother attended a Christian women's dinner, and an angel lady sat across from her at the table. And I asked my mom, 'How did you know she was an angel?' And she replied that she just couldn't mistake an experience like that. And I do believe her. My hairdresser and her husband had a wreck in their car, and she said that a young couple showed up to help them and then disappeared. She was sure that they were angels." And the third story, my neighbor was plowing one of her fields on a spring day, and she didn't know she had fallen asleep until she heard a voice call her name and awaken her, just in time to make a turn so that she wouldn't run into a ditch and have had a terrible tractor accident. So I was just wondering if you, Ben, or Shane, have ever had any experiences with angelic beings.
Yeah, so we kind of answered that, but just to the idea of people showing up, I hear stories all the time about somebody, breaking down in their car. And there was even one where it was a rather rare model of some car, I don't know what, and all of a sudden, somebody shows up with exactly the right part at exactly the right time, and they have no idea who they are, and then they fix the car and leave it and never seen it again.
Yeah, and parts that are so rare that why would you have this?
Bizarre synchronicity. Yeah, I just happen to have that, that particular whatever. I don't know anything about cars, but I mean, I think that is not only very cool, it certainly fills the bill of something that's, I suppose, semi-angelic in the sense. It just goes to show we're not alone.
Right.
And I think that is more of a concrete reality than most of us realize when it comes to non-locality and stuff.
Like to bounce off that too is I've heard many stories where, at least quite a few stories about people, because she mentioned in that church, right? Or Christian Women's Dinner. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard a few stories, and then I've heard other stories of people encountering what they described as what they thought were alien instead of like angelic.
Exactly.
But there was a few stories I can think of where these people were in church because they were going through something or whatever, and this couple, and they all described the same one. It almost sounded like the same person or the same couple almost, but they were blonde, beautiful blue eyes, taller than the average person, very well dressed, like unusual dress, but very well, great attire. And they sat behind this person, and they're thinking, and all of a sudden they hear thoughts in their head that weren't their own, and they look back, and these people are smirking at them. They know it's them communicating with them, but these people were, like we always talk about perception and our experiences, but they really kind of thought that these people were alien as opposed to angels, but they were more into that type of subject anyway.
Well, there are the so-called Nordic
Yes.
type aliens who look like that, but when you talk to someone from India or the Middle East, they don't have that kind of experience. There's the beings that tend to, or the jinn or whatever you want to call them, tend to look more like the local people would, and that would, I suppose, be expected.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's just there's something out there that's. And we always say whatever the explanation is for this, that and we're always talking about parasites, and they prey on us, and they delete it, they take our energy and they eat it, and all. That there's just as much, if not more, positive help out there than there is negative. So,
well, the interesting thing is the manifestation of faith, right? Like in the West, miracles are very different. They're very human, very physical. Angels often take the form of a very lovely like human being, right? Like sort of an ideal human, and it's interesting. Like you show people pictures of quote unquote angels with no context and say, oh, it's an angel or like a statue or something, and they'll know what it is. It's interesting how archetypes really kind of play a huge role in how people sort of, I don't want to say manifest, that's not the right word, how they see phenomena. And if you approach someone, let's say, I don't know, someone from, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say you approach someone in 12th century like Ireland, and you have a picture of an angel with wings and whatnot. They'll probably look at it. They might say angel. They might say fairy. Who knows? There's a really interesting parallel between how people sort of display their faith and what they believe in and the phenomena they experience. And it often really is dictated in how it sort of appears and manifests. For example, in the Eastern Christian Church, there's really not much mentioned to my knowledge of angels sort of appearing to people. There's some mention, but it's really not like a huge deal. Whereas physical apparitions are a really big deal in the West, in every sense.
Yeah.
So the physical apparitions do happen, but it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, in the Catholic tradition, it is a big deal.
Yeah, and you can probably say in some Protestant ones too.
Sure.
It's a part of their faith manifested, and it's interesting how they say faith moves mountains, which is in part true. Where if some people believe something so hard, it tends to become real. I mean, look at tulpas, right?
Yeah.
If you believe something exists, then what's to say that, if you believe so hard that something like an angel exists, that it doesn't? And it's interesting that we're able to kind of, as a species, maybe not have so much power over it, but how it sort of appears before us, whatever it is, and how we view it tends to really sort of be a reflection of how we view the world.
Yeah. Right now, we better take our bottom of the hour break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WON 1240 AM and FM, and 1240 AM and 99.5 FM, with our great special co-host today, Shane Sirois, for one of our open line shows, and we'll be right back, so stick with us.
Hi, I'm Greg Bell, the host of When Radio Was.
I'm Mortimer. Bill. Is that you under that blindfold? Bill, with this thing on, I can't see who I am. No, I imagine not. Can't you see anything at all under that blindfold? On a clear day, I can see the blindfold. You can? Yeah.
When Radio Was, shows from the past for today's imaginations.
When Radio Was airs Monday through Friday, right here on ON 1240 Radio at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Hi, Mooseman here. The Groove Line is aired every Thursday live between 1 and 2 p.m. and replayed at 6 to 7 p.m. All your favorites, a variety of rock, and the Beatles every single week. That's the Groove Line right here on ON.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on WON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's a little bit snowy Blackstone River Valley today, and our famous guest co-host, Shane Sirois, came all the way down from New Hampshire to be with us, as he always does on these great shows, and we're answering a lot of interesting questions today from people, and the topic has run to angels.
Shall we hop into the next question?
Why don't we do that? Who's that from, Ben?
So that is from Mike in Blackstone, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Right here in our listening area, and he writes to us, I'm a longtime listener, and I remember your shows with Ted Phillips, where he was talking about the structure of UFOs changing over the years. So you have talked about this as well. I find that really interesting, and I saw the video of your show from last year where you showed the UFO that you got on video in Pennsylvania. Are UFOs really changing since the Roswell crash of 1947, and what kind of changes are these, and why are they taking place?
Interesting question. Well, essentially, now Ted Phillips is a fellow from Missouri, a friend of ours who has done a lot of research out there, and he has probably the biggest database in the world of physical evidence of UFO landings, here and hither and yon. And he has said, and we asked him very similar questions to that when he's been on the show, and he said, it's funny, from 1947, particularly with supposedly a crashed UFO being found, we're dealing with sort of nuts and bolts craft, as bizarre as they may be. For example, my understanding of the actual finding of whatever they found is that there were no moving parts, there didn't seem to be any engine, and the material felt more like skin than metal. That sort of thing. These are people who supposedly were there. So there's that. However, and our good friend, the late Stanton Friedman, very friend of the show and fellow who wrote the foreword for our 2016 book, was well known in the field, and he was very much a nuts and bolts kind of fellow. He was open to the idea of the multiverse and all sorts of other things, but he was pretty much nuts and bolts. These probably craft from other planets, machinery that's way beyond our own science, et cetera, et cetera. And most people believe that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly plausible. So Ted said that since the nuts and bolts days, UFOs have changed, and he was particularly talking about those in Marley Woods, which is in Missouri, but it's a secret location, much like our Pennsylvania location. It might not stay secret for long, but the idea is that they've become less mechanical and more like balls of light, or light balls, as he would say. He feels these are probes, and he said perhaps that the technology of the aliens or whatever's doing this or building these things or whatever they are may have changed or updated since 1947. I mean, the other possibilities are you've got other kinds of civilizations coming in from every which where, not necessarily from outer space, maybe from other parallel worlds. They may be future people from the future, as has been suggested in some of the Rendlesham Forest, by some of the Rendlesham Forest case witnesses from 1980. So anything's pretty much possible here. So what do you fellas say?
I don't know. I still think that people are still seeing like the old school cigar-shaped UFOs, and as far as the lights too, there's documentation that goes way back in the literature of travelers of the oceans and stuff seeing balls of light in different lights. It just they didn't attribute it or direct it towards UFOs back then. But now that we're doing more research towards it, we're recognizing trends. So these balls of light seem to be showing up, in areas of UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings, and so maybe they didn't make those connections back then, so it wasn't really talked about as much. But I still hearing the same reports. But there's obviously a lot of newer ones, being like this triangle one that everyone's starting to see more and more. And what about these drones? Any updates on those? Not to get sidetracked too much, but all these drones that are showing up over in the Midwest or whatever.
If they're drones.
Yeah, if they're drones, but it's crazy because no one seems to know what they are or why they're there.
You just hit on a very important point there, Shane, because the interpretation of what these lights in the sky are depend on the time, the culture and the time period in which people see them. The Romans reported shields in the sky, or so did the Egyptians. When we have triangular UFOs today, which could very easily be experimental aircraft, people think it's that or the nuts and bolts. Or now there's almost a more spiritual or ethereal approach to the subject, so that you see light balls. So, but I don't know. But that's very interesting.
Well, I mean, we still see the nuts and boltsy kind of craft.
Yeah.
Like they're still around. It's not like they've disappeared.
That's true.
It's as if it's not so much that it's changing, but more and more stuff is happening. Yeah. I would say. I think that with sort of the dawn of other points of view, other than it's a nuts and bolts craft. Particularly with the 60s and 70s, with the sort of new agey movement kind of coming to the foreground, that now people are viewing these rather than, it's Martians coming here to conquer the Earth, more as sort of a humanitarian effort, in a way. And perhaps the change in view of these has changed the craft. Or maybe we're just noticing them for the first time, right?
Mm.
And maybe it's it's stuff that's always been happening, but we're just happen to be noticing it more.
And we all have cell phones with cameras.
Right, exactly. So
and the internet, and the word gets around more.
Yeah, well, I mean, we in the palm of our hand, we literally can access all the information ever, whether it's true or not. But
yes, that's true.
And it's it's like Nikola Tesla's dream come to life, and being able to access all information at all times. I mean, there's so many more reports now. Maybe this stuff has always been happening, but we just haven't been paying attention to it.
Well, perhaps not. Yeah, we are very busy. Well, if either of you fellas has more on that, that's good. We have an addendum from our friend Doug in Texas, whose question we dealt with a little bit earlier, and he mentions St. Vladimir's website. That's St. Vladimir's seminary. That's a seminary that threw me out in 1977.
Irony.
A website cautions against saying the Jesus prayer, but maybe you can explain the Jesus prayer, for the sole purpose of seeing an apparition. This got me wondering if some religious apparitions could be tulpas or perhaps even parasites.
Well, I mean, even in if that's actually a really interesting point, because there's in the Orthodox Christian tradition, there is a big book or volume of books known as the Philokalia, which in Greek means love of the beautiful. And it's essentially a guide for monastics and sort of how to live the monastic life. And
like monks and nuns.
Monks and nuns, basically. Yeah. And most of it is very practical stuff, like how to weave baskets and things like that. But there's some esoteric things in there. And lay people can read it, but typically if you do read it, you should have somebody to guide you to reading it, because you can misinterpret things and it can be horrible. So that being said, the Jesus prayer is basically it's for those in the sort of new agey world, it is the equivalent of a mantra, and for those who are in the Christian-y world, in the Western tradition, you would probably be very familiar with the Rosary. So the idea of the Jesus prayer is you couple your breathing with saying a very simple prayer where you inhale and say, Lord Jesus Christ, and then exhale, have mercy on me. And you keep doing that over and over, and the goal is to sort of attain a state of prayer which is unceasing prayer, which St. Paul outlines in his epistles. And the goal is to, basically do it so much that with every breath it turns into a prayer without you trying to do it. And that's essentially the goal. In the Philokalia, one of the monks that sort of writes that while doing unceasing prayer, a lot of unexpected things can happen. And when they say beware of any apparitions, the thought is I can immediately see where Doug is going here, where he's like, oh well, you're invoking something, I believe, and it's like, okay, well, you're trying to find an apparition. No. The idea is that if you see quote unquote phantoms, as Saint Sirois says, you're doing something wrong. And if you're doing the Jesus prayer and you see phantoms and apparitions, do not trust them, because they are there to trick you. And it is if you do see apparitions, that is, just ignore it, right? In one ear, out the other. Another thing that he says is thoughts are like clouds. They're there, but you can ignore them. Watch them pass by. Don't engage, because it can be dangerous. So the practical thing there is, if you're setting out on this journey of, attaining unceasing prayer, you have to watch out for the obstacles. And those obstacles can be, apparitions appearing and trying to trick you. Or it could be, thoughts, trying to break you of your sort of, for lack of better words, practice. And it's keeping focused and keeping things simple. And if you set out to achieve, something in that realm, you're not going to do it. And if you do see apparitions, that's no good.
I never heard it put so well at St. Vladimir's, unless they said it after they threw me out. So, anyway, but no, thank you, Ben. Outstanding explanation, and so you might extend that to any sort of spiritual effort. Should be aimed at the uplifting of the mind, the soul, and the body, rather than trying to see apparitions.
Right. Well, the goal is to sort of, they call it the Jesus prayer, but it's also referred to as the prayer of the heart.
Yes.
Because you are merging, your entire being into this sort of one movement. And that is the goal, to achieve, to move towards a completion of being a human.
Great. Doug, thank you for the extra question. I wanted to get to this before the show ended, certainly. Now, anyone who listens to the show regularly probably feels as though they personally know Peter Shelley. Now, Peter is is a very, very faithful listener from Bogota, Colombia, and he sends in some very, very good questions almost every show, whether it be open lines or to any particular guest. Well, I got an email from Peter, and he said, if you want, maybe you can read it, Ben, there.
Sure. So, Peter writes to us, Paul, Ben, and Shane. Hi. Or Paul, Ben, and Shane. I got the word order there correctly. I just started my own show called Shadowy Spectrums on YouTube, and what advice could you give me?
Okay, it's a very simple question, but we certainly wanted to give Peter, such a faithful listener, a shout-out on the occasion of his own show. Now, I went to that on YouTube, and the first show was up, and he interviews Klaus Svan, who is a Scandinavian researcher, and I thought it was really good. And the advice, we can go around, just give our friend Peter some advice. I mean, firstly, I would say, from what I heard, you're already doing this, but keep on the subject, pay attention to the guest. Now, you don't have you are hosting by yourself, Peter, and we have 2 or 3 co-hosts, sometimes more, but we still try to keep it on the subject. The occasional levity is permitted, occasional
a joke,
quick joke, but stay on the subject, especially with limited time. So I'd say keep it organized, keep it scripted, get your questions down in advance. At the same time, be open enough to let the discussion with the guest take you where it takes you. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. We already know he has good questions because he writes in great questions every week. But I would say keep doing that. And also, one thing that I don't like that a lot of hosts do is they hijack the interview. So if they ask a question in that's an interest of their own because they had an experience, they'll let the guest start to answer, but then they jump in with their experience.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that more than once.
Well, no, yeah, but you let them describe their experience. A lot of people just cut them off and hijack the interview, and I think that's a big turnoff. But also to stay humble. You know, we're no better, even if we're radio hosts or we're on a stage lecturing to hundreds of people, whatever. We're not better than them. We're all human beings. So keep that in mind and stay humble in your approach, and we already know you have great questions. So good luck, man. I'm going to take a listen.
Yeah, you can always learn from your guests. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I always sort of jocularly referred to Peter as sort of our unofficial co-host.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of him for kind of striking out on his own because he asks really good questions.
Yeah.
And every question is usually very simple, but it has a lot of layers to it, and you can tell that there's a level of insightfulness that is necessary for being able to hop into your own sort of podcast. If you have a thirst for sort of knowledge, especially something that's very unquenchable as the unknown, then a good way to do that is to hop on with guests and or peers and just kind of take a couple questions and hash it out. And it's interesting to watch, and I'm excited to see where he goes with it. And I think we're definitely not I feel weird giving advice about it because it's like there's definitely plenty of other sort of people, prolific figures out there that are probably much more experienced than we are. You excluded, Dad, because you had your own journalistic career. I just happened to go to college for something in this realm. But in sort of the grand scheme of things, there's no formula to it. It's just kind of how you feel comfortable conducting your podcast. And if you feel as if our format and our model works, which we share with Coast to Coast and all sorts of other great colleagues out there, which is just kind of keeping it focused. Because I personally get very annoyed if I'm listening to a podcast or something, and they spend the first 20 minutes kind of just
shooting the breeze about the weather.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's kind of fun sometimes. It's like, for the first few seconds, we just give it 30 seconds, oh yeah, here in the snowy Blackstone River Valley. But then you just hop back into the meat of things because people are listening to you because you're asking questions to people that they've always wanted to ask questions to.
Yeah.
And it's they want to hear from the guests, and they want to hear questions answered, and they want to hear information, experiences, and take it.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, well there you go, Peter. Hopefully that'll help. All right, now there is a question from, maybe we could skip to, because it came in last month and it was in German.
Oh, yes.
And so I kind of translate, is that, it's on second page.
Rosalind?
Yes.
From Weinhausen, Germany?
Weinhausen, right.
Yes, writes to us, Happy New Year. I'm a very avid listener and I hope you will find time to answer a question. There have been angel experiences in my family, so do you think these could be alien experiences? There are many kinds of UFOs you have pointed out. Can there be many kinds of aliens, and can they be at war, or at least competing? And where do we place in all of this? Where is our sort of place in this, I believe?
Well, a lot of questions, a lot of layers, some of which we've dealt with already. You can't get rid of angels today, I guess. Here. So, not that you'd want to. So... as I said, we have angels, aliens. I mean, angels in the broad sense of the term, and certainly aliens in the broad sense might be one and the same. The parasites I dealt with, I'm always citing this Bridgeport case, or what we've all dealt with in different situations, have a very alien feel to them, and they could be aliens too. So I mean, it's just, again, our terms, I guess, have to be somewhat fluid. So I don't know, what do you fellas think about Rosalind's question?
I guess I'll jump on this first. So that is interesting, right? I mean, as I kind of previously stated, it's kind of how you view the experience itself is how it's kind of dictated. Might be aliens. I guess it's taking a step further and kind of what is the definition of alien, right? It would be something that is other, something that is extra, something that is outside of our realm of understanding, which, if you look at it, pretty much any sort of paranormal phenomena could be considered alien, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So if we're referring to extraterrestrials, I wouldn't rule it out, but I also wouldn't rule out, creatures that exist in the multiverse that are, benevolent, that would be open to sort of giving people a helping hand, or perhaps maybe it could be, messengers from God. And, it kind of depends on your theology, your sort of faith, and how the experience is viewed. It might be aliens, in the rawest, most broad definition. And, kind of moving over to the idea of aliens being at war is something that's been postulated by many in the ufology community. Well, I won't say many. I'll say a portion in the ufology community, that there's sort of a war being waged between a couple of different civilizations, whether it's for resources from Earth or, what have you. I think it's like unseen wars and things like that, things that are going on in our own
wars
skies
of the gods, as they used to be called.
Yeah, which isn't new to sort of humanity in our history. And I guess, as for what little we know, it's kind of hard to guess at without A, sounding insane, B, actually knowing what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to chalk it up to, I don't know. It's possible. Who knows?
Yeah, so my Exeter UFO Festival lecture I did not last year, but the year before that, I touched on this, and which I never do, and so it was a rare thing that I talked about this publicly. So from a young age, I started seeing, your typical gray-like aliens in my bedroom, and then, I'm going to go fast through this, but at the age of 10, I got really sick. No one, really knew what was wrong. I ended up having this visitation from this guy that I described earlier in the show. He was the same way, that looked like something trying too hard to look like a human being. It just didn't look right or normal. But that thing or that person, that entity, whatever that was trying way too hard to look like a human, was the one responsible for giving me information on how to deal with these parasitic entities. Didn't really understand all of it at the time because I was only 10 and a half, but, years later when I started in my early teenage years to really kind of dig into this and try to understand it, did I start connecting the dots and, that's what he meant. And it works. It was stuff that you don't hear about, on how to deal with these, your typical tactics that you see from priests or, you see on TV and all this other stuff. It's far different the way I do it. And I get to the root cause. And this was information that was given to me by this entity. And so, yes, and some people might have thought that entity that was there might have been alien. All I know, some people might have thought it was an angel. I don't know. I just know it wasn't. It was different. It was, like I said, there was something really different about it. But the information was accurate. So to answer the last part of the question is, I don't know about. I think there are wars that we know throughout history that may have been created by these things. But one thing I do know for sure, and I would bet anything on it. They are aware of each other because they've worked me. Well, one has worked me against the other since the time I was 10, and I continue to do that work. But I definitely know there's two different types of entities that are aware of one another for sure, and one's not so good, and the other one is a little bit better. So,
well, I agree. I mean, these wars of the gods, as they're called, were pretty much present in every culture throughout history, and they're. It's probably the most open secret of human prehistory was this, because it's in every bit of folklore, which of course is folklore, is the memory of the human race. and so what the meaning was, what civilizations they were, and there do seem to be all sorts of different kinds of civilizations, whether from other planets or from other parallel worlds or both, seem to be present in the memory of the human race. So there you go. I guess that's about all we can say. We have a message from our Richard, or Rick, our show reporter from California, who is just as faithful as Peter Shelley, I think, in certainly calling in and sending questions, and of course as an official reporter. Greasy dialogue today. Is that good?
Not really sure. Maybe
I thought it was just an age thing. I wouldn't know.
No, maybe it is a good thing.
Oh no, then he adds great dialogue on the show today. Okay. All right, guys, I guess it is good. Well, we're expanding our vocabulary.
Maybe it sticks with you.
Yeah.
Or you slip on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's pretty slick, huh?
Yeah, right. So I think we. All right.
Yeah, we should probably hop into our announcements.
Yeah, we should. And let's start with Shane. Now, can you talk about this book you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm finally working on a book, which I have started many, many times, but I fired up my laptop because I finally decided on the direction I'm going to go with it, which I'm really excited about. Open up my laptop and open the folder and realize I already have several chapters written. One I don't remember even writing, but as I was reading, I was like, what is this? I'm like,
angelic guidance there.
Yeah, well, I was reading and I was like, what is this? This is pretty good. Like, what is this? And as I was reading, did I write this? And it turns out I actually did write it. I just didn't remember writing
You should see a doctor.
So no, but I've already got a good jump on it. And now that I decided on the direction, I'm very excited, and it's gonna really pinpoint the negatives in our lives and the things that align us with these negative entities. But then it's going to spin, and it's going to be enlightening, and it's going to really help pull people out of that space, because I get emails from people all around the world asking for that, and I help people in that way. So it's very, very simple, but that's what I'm looking to do.
Well, I can't wait. And then the three of us are working on a book on UFOs. Based on the interviews in the show, being sort of in the style of the 2017 book Ben and I wrote on the cryptids and Mothman, etc. So anyway, so there you go. So we'll keep you posted on how that's going. Now, I guess it's Saturday, February 15th, only a few weeks away, from 1 to 4 p.m., Ben and I make our appearance at the 5th Annual Book Lovers and Authors Expo at the Cumberland Public Library. That's 1464 Diamond Hill Road in Cumberland, Rhode Island. We won't give a lecture at that point, but we and a number of other authors, local authors, will be there with our books, and it's a lot of fun. So come and see us if you can. On April 3rd and 4th, we'll be at the New England Parafest, and I say we, that means all three of us, at the Community Center in Kittery, Maine, a lovely venue, in April, again, 3rd and 4th. Where Ben and I, are the final speakers on Friday evening, the 3rd, I should say the 3rd, and on Sunday, the 5th, as part of the Parafest, we'll do our live broadcast of this show from the Kittery Lions Club. In Maine, so that should be fun. Along with ourselves, speaker will include, of course, Shane. Shane, what's your subject?
It's going to be about strange and scary disappearances.
Oh, that sounds great.
That was a really good talk that you did, too.
Don't disappear before you give the lecture.
I'm going to add a little bit more to it, but I got 15 minutes less time, so I got to add more, but do it quicker.
Well,
I believe in you.
Our subject is going to be, I guess, reflections. I'm making the most of my work anniversary here. 50 years of parasites and all fun stuff we've had. And Bigfoot hunter Dave McCulloch, ancient sites expert Dennis Stone, many more will be there. It'll be great. Don't miss it.
And we'll be back at the... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, and we'll also be back at the Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend, September 5th and 6th, as speakers, and to do our 5th annual live broadcast from the historic Exeter Town Hall on Sunday, the 6th at noon. And the event is sponsored by the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club to raise funds for local children's charities.
Oh, the Parafest, by the way, that we just talked about, is all the proceeds will go to support the Hilldale Cemetery and Haverhill, Mass. Historic Cemetery. So that's for a good cause as well. So, we're almost. We better go to our. What's going on next week then?
So next week we have. That's on January 26th, because there are 5 weeks in January this year. We can look forward to a really interesting show on the connections between dream and disease with Kathleen O'Keefe Canavos?
Canavos, yeah. Okay. Well, we leave you this afternoon with an uplifting quote from 13th century Persian poet and theologian Rumi. Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Shane Sirois. Thanks for joining us on a great cosmic journey, and we'll see you behind the paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.